So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second session of our 5x22 mini-series that's being hosted by Generis's Effective Ministry team. My name is Christy Mora, and I am on the team here at Generis. Our session this morning is led by Dave Ronne. He is the weekend experience strategist on our Effective Ministry team. And we
strong intro there, Christy.
We are at our Generis's company summit, so it's been a long week for us, but we're excited to be here. So aside from serving on our Effective Ministry team as the weekend experience strategist, Dave is also the weekend experience communication and creative director at 12 Stone. Is that correct?
No, just it's a long ways between the two rooms we're in from when you asked me this question. No, right now my official title is creative design. Essentially, I work weekend services and work with the series and the communicators.
And you've been doing this for how long? Do you want to say?
Yeah, well, it's pretty obvious. Actually 20. I'm working on my 26th year at 12 Stone.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. So it's fair to say you're a bit more than a specialist, possibly a guru, but
I'm working on the goatee to prove it. All right, we better dig in.
I know you have a lot going on, so go ahead, Dave. You've got about 20 minutes. I'm going to get off camera and give you the airtime.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Christy. And guys, thanks for joining. And gals, I can't really right now see who's with me. So it is a session that I want to do, which is 4 ways to maximize your weekend services without killing your team. And we all know, man, the last 18, 20 months been incredibly complicated, and it's been stressful and on everybody. As Christy said, I mean, yeah, I'm a consultant with Generis, but for the most part, I'm in there. I'm in the trenches with you. I'm every week. We're working on it. I work alongside the teams that are trying to solve these very issues and make it where we're not just killing ourselves. And that includes teaching pastors, senior pastors, creative teams, worship teams, however you put your services together. So in this season where churches are rebuilding and redesigning and reimagining really what their next season is going to look like, I think it's just especially important to take a look at how do we maximize in January through the first season of the year. How do we maximize that without really killing our team? And how do we maximize it in a way that we can share deeply personable stories about what God is doing and how your vision and the kingdom is moving forward in your church? So I want to talk about 4 sort of common problems in this and see if we can't sort of touch on some solutions. So, really when I say the first thing is this, that I have 22 minutes, I have 4 things to cover. I'll probably cover 3 of them deeply. One of them is I'm going to throw in as a quick bonus, but we do have some materials you can pick up after the session is over, and we'll be showing you how to do that. Christy will explain that. So, let's just hit the first one. Team killer number 1 is this: not having a clear sense of purpose or focus for the next season. And by that, it's like it's just not being clear on what it means to move forward in the next season. And the next season for you could be January to Easter. It could be January to May. It could be January to the end of summer. It could be January to the end of the year, depending on the personality of your church. But this next season, the problem is without clear focus, your team is just simply working week to week and unable to build healthy timelines into projects. And therefore your team isn't moving forward with a good purpose or a clear direction. And you end up at this point, we often lack really building true gospel momentum. What we end up doing is going back and just sort of focusing on week to week. So the killer is this: churches tend to, by the fact that we have church every 7 days, get a little too over focused on the next week. And we certainly struggle with that, just as you do. And we lose sight of just clearly developing a missional season. And by that, it's just a missional season for us. It's just sort of, what are we all in on? And the problem is that this is not something that can be solved. It's just a tension to be managed. That's sort of the Andy Stanley line, you know. And we all understand it, that the tyranny of the urgent often crowds out the important. And remember, a good hierarchy for church communications and churches is gospel mission first, the season and strategy second, and your weekend third. The problem in most of our churches is, though, that we end up really over promoting the weekend, over concentrating on the weekend, and the important stuff that God's calling us to, that we say are the things that should make us successful in this next year and being advocates for the kingdom of God in our area, gets reversed, and we over focus on a weekend. So enough said about that. So I think that a clearer sense of purpose for weekend services comes like this. It's in your season, whether that's now through Easter or through the end of the year. It's in the strategy. And by strategy, I mean it's the specific steps that you're going to take during the next season to see this hope and dream and vision fulfilled. And then it's your next stories. And the stories is what God does next will be the next stories. And these will be told out of this strategy after having sort of defined what the next season's about. And stories are super, super important. And this is what gets lost when we just get into weekend to weekend focus. So that's what I want to sort of talk about. So all of this, seasons, strategies, and stories, bring a clear focus to a team. And a clear focus to a team breathes life into the team, which is also sort of helps it. This season then would not just be such a team killer. But hey, we're all exhausted from a 7-day turnaround. Ain't no question about that. It's difficult. It's very difficult to be able to manage in the 7-day turnaround. It takes a lot of energy to teach well, to bring the scriptures before people, to worship well, and we can't underestimate the effect that has on us. And that this exhaustion of every 7 days, and short timelines to prepare puts all of our teams under pressure and under stress, and is one of those things that just over time, over a year, it won't happen all at once, but it will happen over time. So I'd like to see us look into January and say, what could we do to expand so that now we're defining things and projects, and we know little bits and pieces about where we're going and what we're asking God to do, and how can we highlight that? So at the end of the day, we all have a mission statement. That mission statement typically doesn't change much, but the mission statement is sort of the lens that we look at our next season through. And as we do that, we really come to the second team killer. And so if we haven't really defined our season, then that probably means our strategy is not well defined. So the second team killer is not properly communicating your strategy to your team. And, we have to get clear in the ministry focus for the next season. And some ministry focus remains consistent, but the why and the how change. So for instance, for us, in our definition of our who we are a church that's rooted in prayer. Because of Jesus, we hope to transform souls, families, and communities. And most of our vision and what we're about strategically rotates around those three things. Those three things don't change: souls, families, communities. But what does change is the hows. So the how changes considerably, even as we move into next year. We say transforming souls. That's what we're about. So we have taken the time to inform our staff, and we have envisioned the congregation, just even here in the last few weeks, of here's what we believe the next season is going to be about, and here's the strategy we're going to use to get there. And we said, okay, transforming souls. We're all about seeing the next person come to faith in Jesus and deepen their walk with Jesus and follow in believers' baptism. And for 30 years, we've been about that as a church, and that's probably not going to change. But how we do it will change. We used to say we're one church with many locations. We had 9 locations at one time. We have 7 now. And but now we're saying, we're one church with 2 expressions. Why? Well, because something has changed. What's changed is we both now have live and online or at home. So we have two expressions, a live expression, and we are going to double down on, I wonder what God would do with our at home, our online version. And so we've gone to work on sort of beginning to bring focus to what is it we'd like God to do in that at home version. What do we need to do for 12 Stone at home? And so it's just sort of wherever God may open the opportunity with 12 Stone Home, that's what we can do. That's where we're going to go. And 12 Stone Home, we've just defined as an expression of the local church or of the church where people gather together in their homes, their neighborhoods for worship and community and impact. That it's not just watching services, it's doing those things. And these are all things that I think can really be fertile ground now for us to begin looking and going, okay, I wonder how we can continue to celebrate the fact that God is doing things and changing lives. Well, if we know where we're asking God to do that, then we know where to look for stories. So we're going to look for stories in 12 Stone at home. And at home requires us to do new leaders training. It requires us to move some staff around and put some pastors over this so that they're interacting with at home leaders. And for us to continue to look. Now, we don't know where that's going to go in the next 2 years, but we know for this next season, we're going to continue because like many of you, we are still seeing a tremendous number of people online, and we want to lean into that more so that we see more discipleship and growth. So that's transforming souls. Here's what our team's going to do. We're going to look at that, and over the months, we're going to go, you know where we could look for good stories to tell that reinforce our mission? And here's the beauty of stories. We love stories. It's ironic in this culture that we're in right now that is so story obsessed that the church is often so terrible at highlighting them. But we love talking about what God has done. That's what the scriptures teach. And the New Testament church is about what God is doing. And so what we're trying to do in looking for ways to tell those stories is bring those two things together. Here's what God has done and promised he will do. Here's what God is doing. And it's super important in our weekend programming that we keep that in front of our people, because this builds faith and really reinforces what we believe God would like to happen in other people's life. It inspires people to take the next steps of faith, to take the next steps of generosity, to take the next steps of spiritual growth, to move into leadership. And the more that we lean into that, the better we do. So clearly defined season, our team knows now from January to May, we can go look for a few stories from our 12 Stone at home and our 12 Stone live, because God does what he does live and he does it at home. We're seeing baptisms there. We're seeing fresh faith there. We should be highlighting these stories because this is central to what we believe our church is called to. But what happens is we get so focused on the weekend or the next event that our announcements and our welcomes, they all begin to focus around like, okay, the next barbecue is this, the next fall festival is this. It becomes events and information that we highlight during services. And there's a jillion ways you can highlight stories, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment. But rather than really focusing only on events, we try to, in our weekend services, sort of scatter really great missional storytelling throughout, whether that's somebody from stage telling it or it's some kind of video we might feature. So I think it's important. So transforming the souls, we do transforming families. The culture has left families wrecked coming through this season. And we are going to double down our efforts in re-engage and in growth tracks. So re-engage is a marital thing that we can help put and heal and bring healthy marriages. We believe that's critical to transforming families. And so another fertile piece of ground for our people and our creatives and our pastors to look for stories to pass on both to our teaching, our senior pastors, our teaching pastors, our film teams, our creative ways that we use our service. How can we tell stories about what's happening in re-engage? How can we tell stories of what's happening in growth tracks? Growth tracks is just simply a place that if you're just attending church, it's the first place we just say, go get there. And if you're not doing anything in church right now, go get to growth tracks. It's sort of the message we're pushing out right now. And find out what your purpose and your mission and God's vision for your life is. And then see where you can go get involved in what the kingdom is doing. We are all in transforming families. We want to really go to work on the next generation. And we've defined very clearly for our congregation what that means. Here's what we're going to go do. Again, fertile ground to go tell stories about what God is doing in elementary, middle school, and high school. And here's the mistake I think we as churches make. We get all excited about numbers because it's often our matrix, but the numbers, they don't inspire like the personal stories. So people, do they really care how many 100 people were at your student gathering? We had 50 people. Well, that's fantastic. But every number has a name. They'd sooner hear a story about one of the 50 or one of the 500 or however many kids you have coming to all your ministry stuff. They don't want the numbers. They want to know what God is doing. So let's go tell those stories well. It's important in this next season from January to whenever you can bring clarity to that. So, and then we said, hey, transform communities, souls, families, communities. We are going to focus some on church plants. Many churches can do that right now. Many churches are. And we believe that healthy churches help bring healthy communities. So we're going to tell stories about what we're doing there. Those are encouraging to people to see the gospel move forward. We're going to focus on food insecurity, huge deal in our area. There are stories there to be told and a way to open up opportunities for people to serve the community. We're going to continue to address sex trafficking. It's a huge passion issue for us. With our partner Street Grace. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to volunteer, but what they want to know is, okay, so tell me a story about somebody that's volunteering down at, with Street Grace. And then that will inspire people to serve. Again, it gives everybody, our pastors, our teaching pastors, our creative teams, our worship teams, a way to know well in advance and to plan. So when your staff is clear about the next season and strategy and they get focused, timelines get longer. And when timelines get longer, you're easier able to balance workloads. Now, it's still a lot of work, but it's easier to balance if we're not like, hey, could you by next Sunday, I'd like to be able to tell that story. Could you quickly put together a video on that? Or can we quickly get the details on that story? I want to tell that next Sunday. Well, yeah, you can, but will you tell it well? And the longer we have to work on these things and to better understand them, the better the actual delivery of that story is. So first teach it to your staff, then teach it to your congregation. Here's the season, here's the strategy. And so once we've done that, we can then shift our focus to looking at what God is doing and that these are the next stories of God's supernatural work. And this is, to me, is super critical because remember, the church isn't just about telling the stories about what God did. It's about telling what God is doing now. And these stories are always deeply personal. And churches get lost in numbers, like I'd said. And the most common mistake is we put way too much emphasis on communicating the details and the information. Those are important, but we're looking for multiple ways to tell stories of transformation. And then it's easy to attach the details to it. And basically focus on transformation more than information. Or if we're delivering information, it has to contain the transformation stories. What is God doing? So team killer number 3, not properly highlighting our stories of transformation, as you might imagine. I think we can all agree that Jesus was a master storyteller. So let's not underplay just how important this is. If you could ever really grow in the craft of telling stories in your teaching or in your messages to even approach what Jesus was capable of doing, we'd all be better communicators, wouldn't we? And when we tell stories of our people actively trusting God, it's in part of what inspires other people to take steps of, whether it's into service or faith or community or generosity. And the problem is at churches, as ironic as it might be, is we are really not great students of what great storytelling is. And we've gotten a little bit lazy. We sort of have a one-size-fits-all format for how we tell our stories. They're all basically the same length. They're all basically shot the same way. And I think it's time to get back to being good students of storytelling. We often have timelines. They're short and unrealistic. These things are huge team killers. And, not that that's probably the biggest one, just short timelines. So again, benefit in knowing the season and the strategy is you can sort of chart that out. Be a great way to go into the new year if you as a senior leader, or you could sit down with your teams, your creative teams, and your teaching pastor or teaching pastors, and be able to say, okay, January, we're going to focus some on this. February, I'd like to tell some stories about this. In March, I'd like to tell stories about this. Leading up to Easter, we're going to focus on transformation of souls and seeing what God is doing and telling stories of faith. Give them a longer timeline. You're going to get better results, and your team is going to be a lot happier. But the problem is we often don't have good systems to gather stories of what's happening in these ministry areas. And this is a common problem, and one that it's a tension to be managed. We struggle with it, but we have to try to collect stories from as many sources as possible. And that includes the people on your weekend and your services teams, your small groups, or your community pastors, whatever that might be, pastors, volunteers, small group leaders. We have to get better at telling stories to each other so that we can remember those stories. As leadership teams, we probably shouldn't open or close a meeting without telling stories of what we've heard, so we can get those sort of checked away in our mind. And churches that are effective in collecting stories real time about what God is doing usually take the time in these meetings to share stories about what they're hearing. And I'm telling you, this is really, really key, deserves a whole lot of time. I do a good bit of coaching with creative teams on that creative process, and it's complicated, but it's doable, and it saves the team a lot of energy if we can figure out how to be better at capturing the stories of what God is doing. The key, though, is that not every story deserves equal time, and this is a rule we break all the time. So like in our team, we've had to come up with a way to sort of differentiate. Here's how we differentiate. We call them snacks, meals, and nights on a town. Each of those deserve a little different level of preparation. A snack, we just call as it could be a 1 minute video, a 2 minute video, 1 minute story from stage during the welcome or the announcements, a 2 minute story. Meals it takes a little more preparation. These could be a 1 minute video to a 4 minute video, probably a little higher production value, leaning into the story more. And nights on the town does take a lot of planning. These stories deserve the time, the creative input, the highest production value, more heart, more art, the whole multiple interviews over a longer period of time. But man, these stories really matter, and they could be used in messages. It could be used in as a feature. They're really great. They're evergreen on social media. These stories, whether they're told live on stage or in an interview or whatever it might be, but that do the work on it really matters. But you need to know that not every story deserves equal time. And having stories of multiple lengths then is really helpful to your weekend programming, and in fact allows us to use it in the other formats like our social media and Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of thing. And we all know that when we hear stories that inspire us, it motivates us. It gets us gospel-centered, kingdom-centered, and motivated. And that'll do that for our people. Way more to say here. Would love to coach up, and have conversations with you. But man, let's just say we improve our storytelling, but we do that by having a well-defined strategy, and we know how that fits into our season. Last one. I got about 10 seconds left, but I'm gonna take a minute. Let me take another minute of your time. Bonus. I think we can leverage our new online community to deepen and broaden our ministry of prayer. And it's just something that we've discovered, but I would love to see you guys and churches like you guys to think about this over the next couple of months and ask yourself, what could we do in January that might improve people, having more and more people praying for our church, for our community, for our services, and engaging in a ministry of prayer. And you can do that by doing that online. And where people are heart invested, that's a fantastic thing. And I think we underutilize. Prayer is the most talked about, least done often. And prayer to me is central to the next season. Whatever you're asking God to do, you're probably already praying about it right now. So when asking God to empower and anoint and bless, here's a simple discovery that we've made. We have gathered together on Saturday nights or Saturday mornings every week for the 25 years that I've been at 12 Stone. And we would always have, 5 to, depending on what was going on and how hard we were pressing it into people and inviting people, you might have 75 people there. One of the things we've noticed about online is once we started streaming that, just one camera, set it up, stream it. We're doing an hour of prayer every Sunday. And now, rather than just the 75 people that are live, we have 1,000 people join us online. I don't, maybe let's just say half of them they don't really participate, don't know. But here's what I do know. We have expanded that prayer coverage for our services for the community and for our teaching in a way that's massive. So bottom line, would love to talk to you about it. Got 1,000 ideas about what you can do to do that. We have done 21 days of prayer, 50 days of prayer, 150 days of Psalms. I would love to talk to you about that. I'm super passionate about it. So could go on and on. Christy, I think we have some things they can download, right? And I can't hear you, but that's okay. There you are. And then how they can contact me.
Yes. So first of all, everyone, thank you for being here. Dave, I know you flew through that. It was such great, rich content. And I totally was like, let him just keep going over the minutes. So thank you everyone who stuck around after the 22-minute mark. But you will receive an email from me later today that will have all of the notes that Dave kind of put together. I was like, let's share those. I know you have a lot, so it'll help people process on afterwards. Dave has a couple of downloadables that he created for weekend communication as well as storytelling. So these are actually excerpts from our Year in Giving resource. Fantastic little nuggets, just super helpful. And also I'm sharing with everyone how to get connected with Dave and a blog that I think is a great conversation he had with one of our principals, Brad Leeper, about vision casting. That'll also be in the email, but just more on this conversation. And if you have questions, you want to dig deeper, you need help with storytelling or your weekend experience, Dave is so generous with his time and is always willing to have just 30, 45-minute conversations to talk through your process and what you need help with, totally free because he has a heart of gold and just loves to serve the church. So I will be sharing all of that with you, dropping some things in the chat right now. And I don't want to miss inviting all of you to our next session, which will be next Thursday, same time, 10 a.m. Our third session will be hosted by John Wright, who talks about all things staff culture, which is so important and goes so hand in hand with everything you just talked about, Dave. So 5 tools to lead your best team in 22. And you can register for that at generis.com/5x22. That's /5x22. All right. This was awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. And thank you to everyone who hung out with us this morning.
Yep. Thanks. Have a great morning.
Bye.